What's up, people? We are back. Thank you all for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa Sukasa. And today I want to talk a little bit about this potential war with Iran that hopefully is unlikely. It seems like it is unlikely because literally nobody wants to go to war with Iran except for the Trump administration. But nonetheless, Tulsi Gabbard, in a recent interview with PBS, made sure we knew why exactly. It is just a horrible idea to go to war with Iran. Outside of the humanitarian reasons, Tulsi adds a little bit more context. Let's take a listen.
Iran. Right now, there's a lot of attention being paid to whether the Trump administration is edging closer to some sort of military confrontation with Iran. What would you be doing differently?
A number of things. I think first, it's important to make sure the American people understand that a war with Iran would be far more costly and far more devastating than anything that we experienced in Iraq. What we would see is a devastating cost on our troops, my brothers and sisters in uniform, a cost on the civilians, people both in Iran and across the region, worse refugee crisis across Europe, as well as a strengthening of terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, further undermining our national security. So it would essentially make the war in Iraq look like a cakewalk when we look at the cost of going to war with Iran.
So you wouldn't have pulled out of the nuclear deal?
I would not have pulled out of the nuclear deal. I think Trump needs to recognize that his strategy thus far has been counterproductive and has been a failure. As president, I would re-enter the Iran nuclear deal, negotiate with Iran separately on the other issues that we have, and find a diplomatic way to de-escalate these tensions that we have.
All right, so Tulsi did a brilliant job breaking it down. To surmise what she said, she said that war with Iraq, or war with Iran, would make the war with Iraq look like a cakewalk, and I couldn't agree more. To put things in perspective for you, I went ahead and got a map. Okay? Got a map, because I don't think that people quite understand how real the situation could potentially get. So, here we have a map of the Middle East. I know a lot of you all are not really good in geography, so I went ahead and put it on there for you. So you see, we have Saudi Arabia here, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. I believe this is the UAE area. These are the important players, right? Do you think that it is mere coincidence? Because basically we have control over Iraq. Because it's destabilized, which means we have control over it. Do you think it's a coincidence that we have control over Iraq? Saudi Arabia is on our side. We're allowing the obliteration of Yemen. And now we are re-escalating tensions with Syria. Maybe because they are all strategically placed in front of what could be the largest oil producer in the world in the coming years. The place where the West, Great Britain and the United States, both of them at once upon a time, got the majority of their oil from Iran. Now understand something. Like she said, it would look like a cakewalk because did you notice something a little different about Iran than everywhere else? Except for maybe Saudi Arabia. Iran's big. Iran's not a little big. Iran's big as hell. We couldn't come to a conclusive end of the war in Iraq or the conflict in Iraq. And over what? Hell, we really haven't come to a conclusive end still. It's been, 19 years? Or 18 years? Afghanistan has been even longer. And Afghanistan is significantly smaller than Iraq. And Iraq is a third of the size of Iran. Population-wise, Iran is 80 million compared to Iraq's roughly 30 million plus. Not to mention, I believe the Iranian people would be ready to fight for their country because they know exactly why we're demonizing them. They know what it's about. They've always known what it's about. Strategically, and if I'm not mistaken, Iran directly borders Russia, who they would likely go to for help in the event they were invaded. So let me verify this, but I'm pretty sure they border Russia. No, they don't directly border Russia. My bad. They directly border Turkmenistan, but they do directly border Eastern Europe and Turkey. But Turkey would be also on the side of the United States, most likely. But basically, if they don't directly border Russia, they do border areas that Russia could funnel supplies through. Because most of Eastern Europe doesn't like the United States for obvious reasons. We keep trying to, ruin their governments. Obama invested like $58 billion or something to that extent in trying to in military finances in Eastern Europe, and like nobody batted an eye. So, just strategically, yeah, you have a destabilized Iraq that we could launch from. Saudi Arabia would obviously let us, do what we can do from there. You have the seas. But at the end of the day, Saudi Arabia was on our side when it came to Iraq and Afghanistan. 20 years. And we still haven't squared that situation away. Saudi Arabia is on our side, supposedly, and Iraq is destabilized right now where we have bases. When it comes to Syria, we still haven't been able to effectively overthrow Assad, even with all the cheating and conniving that we've done. What in the hell makes anyone think that we can successfully and proficiently and efficiently go to war with Iran and win? I'm serious. Like, I really want to know. With all of our troops in Afghanistan and Iraq, we couldn't win. I don't give a damn what they tell you. We ain't won nothing. The casualties would be insane for both sides. There's nothing to gain. Iran is not even close to an immediate threat to our national security. And yet we're considering going to overthrow a country that is 3 times the size of Iraq when we couldn't even it took forever to overthrow Saddam. And just because we overthrew Saddam doesn't mean we won the war. Iran is not a game. First of all. Not to mention, they haven't done anything wrong. Now, I want to go back to something that Tulsi said in the video about the refugee crisis that would be exacerbated. There's already a bad refugee crisis. Look at the refugee crisis that was created from Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. Look at the international destabilization that's come about from that. Now imagine doing that to a country, creating the issues that led to the current refugee crisis. Imagine doing that to a country that has 80 million people. Imagine that. With the United States constantly demonizing those who come from that country. Trying to pretend as if, those are just evil people who want to come and take your white women. That's what the narrative is, right? We could prevent all of that. We could prevent all of that by telling the Trump administration a loud and resounding, hell no, we're not going to war with Iran. You can kiss all of our asses. Going to war with Iran for what? For y'all oil companies? Nah, we're good on that. Going to war for what? So more of my brothers and sisters in arms can die for who? There is literally nothing. There is zero reason whatsoever to go to war with Iran, and yet Bolton keeps trying to pretend that it's necessary. Shanahan, the new Secretary of Defense, keeps trying to pretend that it's a necessity. And what a surprising coincidence that Shanahan, the new Secretary of Defense, spent 30 years at Boeing before he became the Secretary of Defense. Don't you think that might be a little conflict of interest? Just a little bit. Might be a little conflict of interest there. At the end of the day, it's bad strategically to go into Iran. It's bad morally to go into Iran. It's bad financially to go into Iran. And what Tulsi Gabbard showed and said is 100% correct. Diplomacy is always the answer. War is always the last resort. If we can prevent people from dying, one more day, one more year, 5 more years, that always should be the first option. We shouldn't even be talking about war until it becomes an absolute necessity. Understand, historically, the people have not, like, I'm talking about thousands of years. Isn't the people who've wanted to go to war? It's those in charge of the people who've always wanted to go to war. And they've always tried to unify around a particular identity, pretend like it's a moral crisis. And the people rarely, if ever, wanted to fight in them. And that hasn't changed. A few people are trying to tell us that Iran is a threat to our national security, and it's a lie. They're not just like the kings and the queens of the day. They are not the ones who are going to die. The poor people who are forced to enlist in the military because they don't have health care or because they don't have they're trying to get free college. Those are the ones who are going to get shot at. Those are the ones who are going to die. The poor people in Iran that are suffering under ill-gotten sanctions that shouldn't be there. They're illegitimate. Those are the ones who are going to die. Not the people, not the elite. And once again, this Iran situation is something that the commander-in-chief will clearly be dealing with in the imminent future. And yet, Tulsi is the only one out of all the presidential candidates who has spoken out about it. And not only spoken out about it, but got it 100% right again. If we don't get a hold on the military-industrial complex and put someone in power, or put someone in leadership, I should say, that understands foreign policy at the root level, at the foundational level, it doesn't matter who we put in office, because domestic policies, yeah, you give me health care now, if even. You give me free college now, but then you institute a draft immediately so we can go fight in someone else's war, so it doesn't matter. That's what happens. Give you a few good domestic policies and then send you or your son or your daughter off to war. We need someone who understands both. Who doesn't just say, oh, not interventionism. Yeah, okay, that sounds great. But when you're being lied to directly, and then you echo those lies, not realizing that you are inadvertently manufacturing consent, then you're still a part of the problem in that regard. And Tulsi seems to be the only one who not only refuses to manufacture consent, but calls out attempts to manufacture consent. And that's who we need in office, honestly. I would love to know what your thoughts are about this. Leave a like in the comment below. Share the video. And hey, people, remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace.